In the shadows of Brooklyn streets, one man dared to do the unthinkable, defy the mafia, outsmart the feds, and build an empire so massive that even John Gotti had to respect his name. He wasn't Italian. He wasn't connected by blood. He wasn't supposed to win. But Frank Peewee Matthews rewrote the rules, becoming America's first true black drug kingpin, earning a fortune, commanding soldiers, and terrifying rivals. This is the untold story of Black Caesar, the man who rose from stealing chickens in North Carolina to running a $300 million empire in New York City, and then vanished into thin air. Early life, from Peewee to troublemaker, Frank Larry Matthews was born on February 13, 1944, in Durham, North Carolina. A small boy with a big vision, they called him Peewee because of his scrawny frame. But make no mistake, behind that nickname was a future kingpin already forming. Life hit him hard when his mother died in 1948. At just 4 years old, Peewee was raised by his aunt, Marcella Steele. Ironically, her husband was a Durham City police officer. But even growing up under the same roof as the law, Peewee had no interest in a straight path. By junior high, school was behind him. He dropped out after 1 year, already fixated on a different future, fast money, and total power. His inspiration? A local singer named Clyde McFadden, who left Durham for New York and came back in a shiny Cadillac with pockets full of cash. That image burned into young Frank's mind. By the 7th grade, Frank had already written an essay predicting his life. His plan was simple: get rich, then retire in South America. The vision of an empire was already on paper, long before the streets knew his name. But first, Peewee needed to prove himself. At just 14, he organized his own neighborhood crew, sending kids as young as 8 on chicken raiding missions. When a farmer caught on and tried to confront him, Peewee didn't back down. He picked up a brick and cracked the man's skull. It was his first taste of the system. Arrested for assault and theft in 1960, Peewee spent time in the Raleigh State Reformatory for boys. But punishment didn't change him. It only sharpened his hunger, hitting the streets from Philly to Brooklyn. At 17, Frank left country life behind and headed north. His first stop, Philadelphia. There, he learned the numbers game, working as a writer and quickly realizing he could pull 6 figures a year just from policy rackets. But Philly wasn't just about numbers. It was networking. Peewee linked with heavy hitters, figures connected to the Black Mafia like John Pops Darby and Tyrone Fat Ty Palmer. With his childhood friend Cadillac Tommy Finkton by his side, Frank was learning how the underworld moved. By 1963, the law was closing in, so Peewee slid out and made his way to the Big Apple, Brooklyn, New York. He set up shop as a barber. But the barber chair wasn't his dream. It was a front. Inside that little shop on Tompkins Avenue, Peewee was quietly building power. Soon, the shop doubled as his headquarters, a place where hustlers came not just for fades, but for deals, protection, and business. In the underworld, word travels fast. By 1965, Frank was known as an enforcer with iron fists. At 5'9" and nearly 200 pounds, he wasn't Peewee anymore. People said he hit like a young Mike Tyson, compact, powerful, and unpredictable. And the Italians noticed, playing with the mob. In Brooklyn, the numbers game was controlled by the Italian mafia. Peewee worked under them at first, collecting, enforcing, and keeping black hustlers in line. One old mobster later recalled, "Tough kid, charismatic, he got his people to do things his way, which really was our way." But Peewee wasn't built to take orders. He studied the Italians, learned the structure, and then started carving his own lane. By the late 60s, he was looking beyond numbers. He wanted dope money. The problem? To touch heroin in New York, you had to go through the mob. Peewee tried the diplomatic route. He sat down with connected Italians like Louis Cirillo, hoping to lock in a steady supply, but the mob shut him down. That's when Frank Matthews made his boldest decision yet. Forget the mob, breaking free, the first black kingpin. If the Italians wouldn't supply him, Peewee would find his own plug, and he did, through Spanish Raymond Marquez and Cuban dealer Rolando Gonzalez. Gonzalez handed Peewee his first real brick, pure, uncut, better than anything the mob was pushing. Frank flipped it, doubled his money, and never looked back. He turned his numbers network into a drug distribution army, selling heroin and cocaine through bodegas, pool halls, and clubs. Within weeks, he controlled entire neighborhoods. His prices were better, his products stronger, and his loyalty sharper. By 1970, Frank Matthews had pulled off the impossible. He had broken the mob's grip on the heroin trade. He was importing directly from South America, cutting out the Italians entirely. The streets crowned him Black Caesar. Defying the mafia. The mafia wasn't happy. Wise guys claimed he didn't know his place, but Peewee wasn't scared. When a mobster threatened him, Frank snapped back, "Touch one of mine, and I'll send my men to Little Italy and shoot every last one of you." The Italians tested him and quickly backed off. Peewee had more firepower, more soldiers, and more willingness to pull the trigger. Even John Gotti respected him, seeing in Peewee a kindred flamboyant spirit. But Frank didn't just flex with violence, he flexed with style. He bought a mansion across from Paul Castellano, the Gambino underboss. While Italians whispered about killing him, Frank spun donuts on a racist neighbor's lawn just to prove he wasn't backing down. Peewee wasn't a pawn anymore. He was playing king, building an empire. At his peak, Frank Matthews was pulling in over $600,000 a day, running a drug pipeline that stretched across more than 21 states. He had New York, Philly, Boston, Baltimore, D.C., Chicago, St. Louis, even Miami under his control. The feds later estimated his fortune at over $300 million. In today's money, that's billions. But what made him different was his strategy. Instead of waging wars, he made alliances. Local hustlers weren't enemies, they were partners. That kept the streets quiet and the profits flowing. When Peewee spoke, the entire coast listened. Once in 1972, he shut down heroin distribution for weeks, causing panic in the ghettos. Even the mob didn't dare move product without his green light. The black Scarface Peewee lived like royalty. He built a mansion in Staten Island with gold-plated fixtures and marble floors. He drove a new car almost every week, rocked mink coats, and showered women with cash. He was feared in the streets, but also loved. Every year he gave away a Cadillac on Bedford Avenue, no strings attached. To the people, he was a legend. To the feds, he was public enemy number one. And to the mob, he was the nightmare they could never control. By the early 1970s, Frank Matthews had achieved what no one before him could. He became the first true kingpin of America's drug empire. He outsmarted the mafia, outran the cops, and built a fortune so massive it shook the entire underworld. But here's where the story twists. Just as the DEA closed in, just as indictments stacked and the noose tightened, Frank Matthews pulled his greatest move yet. One day, he simply disappeared. No body, no arrest, no goodbye. The man they called Black Caesar vanished with millions in cash, and to this day, nobody knows where he went. Did he retire in South America, just like he predicted in 7th grade, or did the mob finally get their revenge? That is the mystery of Frank Peewee Matthews. If you enjoyed this dive into New York's most legendary kingpin, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold stories, and drop a comment below. What do you think happened to Frank Matthews? Did he escape the game forever, or did the streets finally catch up?